Well, everybody, I'm Cantonese Cat. Hey, everybody, Cantonese Cat here. Please let me know if you can hear and see me. I get so paranoid when it comes to these kinds of live streams. I feel like sometimes I just end up talking for a period of time and into nowhere, and nobody said anything, and then it just kind of ended up just, you know, being me talking to myself, and which is fine. I do that all the time anyway, but just want to make sure that y'all can hear me. Hey, the usual suspects are here. I'm gonna go ahead and thank you, Tracker. Thank you so much. I know you guys used to do daily shows, and now it seems like I'm doing daily shows just because I got 2 days off. So, first of all, if you celebrate the Lunar New Year, Happy New Year to everybody. It's the year of the horse, and you know what they say about horses. They are very I don't know. I'm gonna say in Cantonese we say "Sunning Phai Lao." Sunning Phai Lao. In Mandarin it's "Xin Nian Kuai Le." I think that's, man, my accent is probably terrible. Anyway, go and get straight in the point here to talk about what the greatest fear that a lot of people have. A lot of people have fear because of fear itself. A lot of people have fear because Bitcoin has crashed, and they think that the market will crash as a result. And if the market is to crash, then Bitcoin is going to crash further with the market, because Bitcoin is a leading indicator and it leads the market, and the market is going to crash. But the market crashes, then there's less liquidity available, where Bitcoin is going to end up, cascading back to Bitcoin, and everything is going to end up just crashing, and they're all just going to go to zero. That argument makes a whole lot of sense if you don't think. But if you think, then it may not make that much of a sense. I'm not saying it won't happen. I mean, the market does whatever it wants to do, but I just don't know whether or not fear is really investment or trading strategy. Because if you look at Bitcoin, the only real big, really true time where they truly correlate together with the stock market. I'm not going to use SPY here because SPY is relatively smooth. There's not really a whole lot of volatility here to look at. I'm not going to look at QQQ here. These are things that, everybody is getting forced to buy index funds from the 401k, from the retirement fund. It's not really reflective of what the market actually does. I like to look at the small cap stuff, instead of looking at all these labels. I'm just going to do Russell 2000 here. And if you compare Bitcoin and Russell 2000, there was a period of time from 2020 all the way to 2022. These two correlate pretty much more or less one-to-one, with the exception of starting around mid-2022. That's when they really start to have a lot of divergence, and they really trying to just throw everybody off. And they are really just not wanting to have you make money, because they want you to think, oh, hey, Bitcoin's going up. That's great. It's already recovering. Stock sucks, right? Stock market sucks. Oh, well, Bitcoin's, it's holding relatively well over here. Stock market sucks, right? And next thing you know, they both kind of go up a lot during this period of time. And next thing you know, Bitcoin starts sucking here for the entire year. I'm sure you guys remember that, when stocks were actually doing very, very well for a period of time. And then they end up doing very well. And next thing you know, everybody end up rotating into stocks, and stocks end up crashing. And then Bitcoin ended up holding very well all the way even into the April crash. Actually, it was showing, quote, relative strength, unquote. And a lot of people looking at this are like, oh, let's get into MSTR. Let's buy, Metaplanet. Blah blah blah. Let's get into all that. Next thing you know, funny how this works, right? You have Bitcoin kind of crashing and do a little bit of ABC down here, when the stock market just kept on just wanting to keep ripping up higher. And here we are, where you have Bitcoin crashing. Is Bitcoin a leading indicator about the market crashing? I don't know what that means. I just think that they're individual assets, and one has been greatly deleveraged, and that's why it's doing very well. And the other one hasn't really been greatly deleveraged yet, and now it's being greatly deleveraged. And maybe it probably end up doing well moving forward. I don't know. That's kind of what I'm seeing here, because they're not really in sync with one another. If anything, I think they're just like a little bit of a separate. I think we even made a very good analogy earlier. Like, it's almost like they're married, but not really. And then Bitcoin is taking a Cialis and is just kind of living out in a separate world. And they're separated since mid 2022. They're kind of going out and doing their own thing. And one person might be going through some pretty high stuff there. The other person might be going some pretty low stuff here. And then when the other person sees the other person having a great time, they just also want to go out to the bar and get attraction, things like that. Sometimes they both, get what they want for a period of time, but then it keeps on just kind of rotating one thing or another. And then these emotions just kind of switch around. And next thing you know, they got lawyers, and one of the lawyer wins, and the other one, it's just, they just dance. There's not really like a whole lot of regularity in terms of how one is really predicting the other. And I think if you zoom out, the one thing that is happening for sure is that they've both gone up a lot since November of 2022. But if you end up rotating one thing to another and just keep on using leverage and keep on getting destroyed, and you do different calls thinking that you're just gonna end up timing perfect market perfectly, you may not be making that much money. And that's kind of how it is designed to do it, because this is a slow burn dynamic. And if you burn too fast, it's you're gonna end up just having a long refractory period. That's kind of how these things work. And that's what I'm seeing here with the market. So I don't know whether or not people are expecting a stronger crash because the overall market. You can say that yes, the S&P 500 does look weak. I'm going to look at like the individual. Let's see here. I'm going to look at the why people say that the S&P 500 is weak. Well, it's weak because it just looks like it wants to roll over. Looks like it wants to roll over here. Looks like it wants to roll over here. It's going to drop 20% just like it did back in April, because it just looks just like that, right? Just like it looks a little rounded over here, it must drop another 10%. Just like it was a little bit rounded over here, it must drop another 20%. I don't know. I mean, I keep seeing these kind of like rounded top thing just keeps going higher in history, and just a lot of times they just keep going higher. I don't know. I don't know what that means, right? And a lot of people are kind of saying, well, look at the weekly bearish diversions. This is definitely a top. We're going to go down 20%. I'm not saying that it won't. I'm not saying that it won't come back and back to this previous high over here. It certainly can, and that would be healthy, but does it have to? I don't know. I mean, I just, oh no, it's going up on bearish diversions. Has it ever done that and not crash? Yeah, it's done that. Like here, I'll show you, like 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, going all the way in 2016. It just kept on going up here, and it kept on forming this rounded top over here. And the RSI just kept on dropping here for like 3 years in a row, until it finally crashed like 10% here and 15% here, like 3 or 4 years down the road, and then it just kept going up higher. So I don't know about these things being like a certainty. I just don't understand the absolutism. I guess it's nice to be warned that something like that could happen, because it could very well happen. I did show an SPX chart here with my GAN here. I think I kind of lost again. That's okay. Oh, actually, I think it was probably NDX or QQQ. I don't remember. I did show a GAN chart, and I could reproduce it fairly quickly, but I won't. I think the downside could be all the way down to like 500 or 480 is possible, right? That's the downside. But you're also talking about upside risk here too. Let me do this here. It's always dangerous to draw against square live. But it's a pretty straightforward thing here. If I remember the settings, I think I did like 360 and 5, pretty standard. Actually, no. What am I doing, guys? I don't know what I'm doing. There you go, it's 10. Pretty good market symmetry here. If you look at it again, if you're thinking about, you know, downside risk versus upside risk. Yeah, it's been following the 45-degree angle here perfectly fine. Can it drop all the way down to 500? It's possible, right? I mean, can it backtest a horizontal line over there? It's possible. Does it have to? No, it doesn't. Look at the potential upside risk over here. You're talking about you have to balance between the two, right? So I just don't know about like all these certainty thing. If anything, I think that we've been a little bit overextended here with the QQQs. And what generally happens when you're overextended, you just go sideways here. You wait for the blue line, the Ichimoku Tengen here to catch up. Sometimes it doesn't even have to catch up. You just have to get close to it, kind of like here. You just get closer and just next thing you just keep going higher. Sometimes you can go sideways here for a few months and do nothing. It's fine, right? You can go sideways or do nothing, just tack the blue line and just keep going up higher. I think we're just waiting for the blue line to play catch up, and that's probably why it looks like it's showing some relative weakness. And I don't really find this to be that concerning. Now it can always break down and go down to the red line over here. It did that back in April 2025. That can happen at any time. Does it have to do that? Again, I'm not sure because it just happened less than a year ago. And these things generally don't, like these crazy flash crash, they just don't happen very often, you know? Like 25% on the NASDAQ, that just doesn't happen very often. Every year you're gonna get about like 10 to 12%, and that's completely normal. And we might be, you know, getting close to that. Even here, like this candle over here is close to 10%. I just don't know about the certainty of a crash. I just don't know whether or not it has to happen, you know, that close together. I don't know. And when people are talking about certainty, I do worry that it may not happen. If anything, I think that there might be a little bit of rotationary forces going on. I think that small caps have been running hot. And I think that we're just waiting for this. I made a whole video, about half the video, talking about the copper to gold ratio yesterday. And I think that this might be bottoming, and this might signal rotationary forces into more of a risk-on environment, because it's extremely risk-on from 2020 to 2021, relatively risk-on here from 2016 to 2017. I do think that we might be at a juncture where this is so overextended to the downside, we might just bounce, and that could be our risk-on environment here. And generally when that happens, you have the large caps doing nothing while waiting for small caps to kind of play catch up and become more euphoric. That's just kind of where I think we're at right now. Maybe it's all speculative. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe none of these things is going to happen. But it just makes me think that I think that's what we're waiting for. Now, going back to Bitcoin, a lot of people think that Bitcoin is going to crash. Well, you know, we just kind of had a flash crash over here. This period from October of 2025 all the way down to February 2025, I find that to be relatively similar to November 2024 to April 2025 here for the small cap for IWM. And I lined these two up here with Bitcoin here on the left and IWM here on the right. Even timing wise, they seem relatively similar. From a local bottom over here to a local top over here, it's around 57 weeks over here. It's around 61 weeks over here for Bitcoin. And during this crash down, it's relatively very quick. It was a flash crash over here, with the majority of the crash actually happened within, like, you know, just a couple weeks over here, maybe 2 or 3 weeks over here for IWM. And the entire crash here happened for about 19 weeks. With Bitcoin here, the crash so far has been happening 17 weeks. Now, can it keep bouncing underneath the 0.236 here? I suppose it could, but I like to see the 0.236 here holding. So far, there's nothing really telling me that this fractal absolutely would not work out. Generally, if it's a flash crash and if it's not like an overall liquidity crunch, you can see it's not overall liquidity crunch because IWM is like still closer to its all-time high. So there's no reason to think that is, unless if you make up the, you feel strongly about Bitcoin being a leading indicator, which again, I made a video yesterday about how I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I do want to see the 0.336 here holding. Even during the IWM scare over here, it basically spent week number 1 to get to 0.336 and go beyond, left the wick down below week number 2 to touch the 0.136 here. We have not really touched it necessarily. I don't think it necessarily has to do that. But yeah, weeks number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Fourth week, it went back and touched the 0.236. So far, we're going through weeks number 1, 2, and 3. And so far, week number 3, we're touching the 0.336 here again to back test it for a third week in a row. I would like to see that level holding for this to work out, relatively well. And if it doesn't, then so be it. We'll lose more momentum and it may not be a V-shaped recovery. I completely accept that. If this fractal works out, then theoretically we'll be at an all-time high here by roughly mid-November 2026. If this fractal works out very similar to what happened with small caps. I don't know whether or not it's going to or not. Like, to me, it's just, speculative. With that said, I also think that a lot of people were worried about Bitcoin crashing and that altcoin is going to crash more. And the reality is that Bitcoin has had a very drastic crash here, but Bitcoin dominance is starting to drop. And a lot of alts actually, especially larger cap alts, has been holding relatively well over the last couple of weeks. And if you're looking at this chart over here, which I've posted on X, what we're really kind of seeing here is we have Bitcoin down here at the bottom, and we have a chart here called others.d. It's not anything sexual, it's just the dominance of the non-top 10 cryptocurrency coins. So basically, others by itself is the cryptocurrency market cap excluding the top 10 coins, and then you put a little bit of .d there. It just means that the percentage of the cryptocurrency market cap that belongs to coins outside of the top 10. That tells you pretty decent in terms of how altcoins are doing. And so far, this is a monthly chart, and so far this month, altcoins have been outperforming the top 10 coins, including Bitcoin and Ethereum. And you are seeing some dominance over here happening. You are also seeing a deceleration of this ABC downtrend. And the deceleration is finally showing up on a very delayed indicator called MACD, with essentially an impending bullish cross over here. All this stuff is happening while Bitcoin plummeted from 127,000 all the way down to 60,000, right? More than 50%. If you're looking at this and you think, okay, so you have a relative bullish divergence here for altcoins. Great. What happened the times before that? Well, you had a very mini altcoin season here for about 6 months, and there were a lot of very impressive gains that happened during this period of time during this ABC retracement with the B part of it for just 6 months. And this is from June 2023 to roughly around December, January 2023, 2024. A lot of gains were made at that time. And that was just maybe a little bit of a taste in terms of what happened if that was the B retracement. And that during that time, mid period of time, interesting thing happened too. Bitcoin actually was showing some relative weakness over here during that time, and you also right before that. So you have a bullish divergence here with altcoins, with Bitcoin dipping down over here, with others.d increasing. The last really crazy altcoin season really happened starting around March of 2020, right? All the way into roughly around November 2021. Like, this really happened for about a whole year and a half over here, with others.d just kept going up for about a year and a half. And with that happening, it was preceded by Bitcoin plummeting all the way to the COVID crash, and with others.d actually holding relatively well here for about 6 months, leading into something that is very impressive for altcoins. And that was also happening in the context of having bullish MACD cross, just like it did over here, right? I do wonder whether or not this is a rotationary force with some relative bullish divergence, and whether or not this crash over here is more similar to this crash over here rather than this crash over here because of how altcoins are behaving, right? We're not having a bearish cross, we're having a bullish cross, right? We're not having a bearish cross here, we're having a bullish cross over here for others.d. So that does make me wonder whether or not we're at the point of the cycle where instead of just getting a prolonged bear market, especially when IWM looks like this, that we might actually be getting a little bit ready for a ridiculous scenario where altcoins actually will do fine. I cannot even imagine such a scenario after ABC retracement of others.d. I cannot even picture that scenario, so maybe it might actually happen because of that. Hey, buddy, I know you're talking about hyperliquid. I just want to make sure I get the right ticker here. But anyway, I just wanted to share these, like, you know, overall thoughts here. Now, I would go through some individual tickers here, and I would probably do a little bit of request here too in a little bit. But yeah, I just think overall things seem to be more stabilizing with higher risk kind of stuff. And even with, I'm going to go through a couple of tickers here, right, and tell you kind of what I think about them. Palantir, I'm still waiting for a good reaction to come off of this downtrend. I still don't know whether or not the absolute bottom is in. With the kind of fear that's been going out there, I do think that we might be starting to kind of stabilize. You wonder why Palantir didn't end up going that much further this week. Well, it's because of the Bollinger Band. On the weekly, it simply hasn't really been expanding that much further down, and if anything, Palantir started out way underneath the low Bollinger Band here on the weekly, and it basically just got dragged back up there because things are a little bit too overextended to the downside. Sometimes when you have behavior like that, it ends up forming a little bit more of a bottom. You end up having price being too far away from the mean, and you end up having a mean reversion here back into the 20-week moving average, which is downward sloping here, by the way. So you might end up having a little bit of a battle over here to try to claim that back into support. If we get rejected, then we'll have another leg lower. If we end up pushing it higher, then we go back, you know, normal. With that said, I do think that there are some signs that we are, you know, starting to kind of form bottom here, because you're starting to see some signs of some bullish divergence here on the daily, which generally is, you know, necessary for a base formation to start. At least seeing a little bit of, you know, bullish divergence here on the daily chart, which I'm starting to see that here. We're also starting to see this zone here getting tapped here with this high back in February 2025. I know this is something that Danny's been looking at pretty closely. We essentially tapped that area, and that might be the area where we might end up, you know, kind of forming a base over here to before we go higher. With that said, a lot of the higher time frame, you know, support I was looking at initially seem to be lost. You know, you do have the 20-month moving average down here around 112. I do wonder whether or not we're going to touch that or not. There's no guarantee because a lot of the software stocks had already touched it. So I don't know whether or not Palantir has to do that. You know, for example, I was looking like another stock that basically looks just like Palantir is APP. APP has already touched the 20-month moving average here, you know, pretty much perfectly. So I don't know whether or not Palantir has to do that. But that's a possibility, and if it does, I think that would be a great zone of support, but it may not get there. Tesla has not been doing very well today. It's down about 4% at some point, but the reality is this: it's still touching the candle tops up here. The reality is that it was a little bit overextended here for a few months, and it's just waiting for the Ichimoku Tenkin to kind of play catch up here. It's finally playing catch up. It tagged it this month. So I don't see any reason it has to go down that much further. If it decides to flush down further, the 350s, 360s backtest that zone, so be it. If it decides to do that, I don't have anything to kind of, you know, say about that. Besides that, that would still be a higher low, and this is still a healthy bull trend. And if you just take all these indicators here, this is still going to be a big cup here, and this is still going to be a handle. If it decides to make another handle down, that's fine. This is another cup over here. It's not going to bother me that much when I'm not holding calls, when I can wait, when it's right at higher time frame support. I'm going to lean more bullish here with a stock like Tesla. For NVIDIA, I think the reason why why I'm relatively more bullish on the market rather than bearish is because I've been waiting for this to happen. I've been waiting for the blue line Ichimoku Tenkin to kind of play catch up here. It was a little bit too far extended about 5 months ago. I've been waiting for it to kind of play catch up here to touch that. We finally did that, kind of like we did over here in March of 2021 before it kept on going up higher. It finally did that, so it makes me feel more confident. I think that the overall market may not crash. It's just a theory, right? Tesla touching the Ichimoku Tenkin almost perfectly. NVIDIA finally waited and touched it perfectly fine. Another reason why I also have a hard time believing that the market is going to necessarily crash down that much more is because Microsoft has finally closed the stupid monthly gap that left open about a year ago. When I saw that gap, I was like, crap. It's a Microsoft, one of the biggest market cap companies, left a big monthly gap, probably going to be even close at some point. Parabolic move up here. Matter of fact, I was talking about this on X2. I also think that one of the reasons to why I think Bitcoin may have bottomed is probably, and this is purely speculative. I don't know anything. Okay, I don't know anything. I'm just here. I'm just yapping. I'm just another cat here yapping. The reason why I think Microsoft has kind of crashed is maybe because it was just, waiting to close the gap here, and Bitcoin also kind of crashed together with it to basically revisit this liquidity zone over here. Pretty much at the same time as Microsoft is crashing and trying to close that gap. The fact that Microsoft closed this gap over here perfectly fine actually strengthens my thought that maybe Bitcoin has bottomed here. It's just a thought. I don't know anything, but that is just a thought. Yeah, when somebody's mom asks you if the market would drop soon, that's a pretty good indicator that I think it may not. And I think that might be another good sign here too. But that's just another thought here that I just wanted to kind of bring up here. Yeah, going through all these different large cap stocks, they all more or less kind of find some decent solid footing here. So on the other hand, you also have a lot of stocks that have ran up a lot that has not been doing very well, because I think that it's time for them to just, it's just time for them to correct, I guess. HIMS, extremely brutal, absolutely brutal. This is a log fib, right? This is a 0.5 log fib. If it's linear fib, it's already way past like 0.5. You already retraced more than 50% of this entire move all the way here from the bottom, right? It's gone insane in terms of retracement. It's already past the 0.236 here too, and 0.136 is down here around 12, right? With something that had gone that parabolic, I usually look more at like log fibs. And we look at log fibs here, there's confluence here around the $14 zone, which is the Ichimoku cloud. Like the top of the Ichimoku cloud is right there. We have a breakout. We have not had a chance to backtest. Unfortunately, the cloud's all the way down here. Doesn't mean that this falling knife here is going to stop at 14. Heck, do I know? Like, do I want to buy HIMS at 14? No. I mean, even if it finds support here, it could dip down and you can do whatever it wants to do. Maybe it needs a little bit more of a base, formation here before going up. It can even go all the way back here to like the $12 zone I was showing you, which there's some confluence over here, right there, right? So yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is just an extremely rough situation here. And the way I was seeing HIMS was showing a lot of relative weakness here around the 30s, and I did kind of mentioned, hey, you know, support could hold and it could be it, but I think I wouldn't I wouldn't like blame you if you want to rotate from HIMS to other stocks that have more like relative strength. So I hope that, you know, that message gotten across. But yeah, that's kind of what I think about HIMS. Somebody mentioned about a small cap called CAPR. Oh, wow, this is interesting. Yeah, I don't know if I want to chase something like this, but it does look like a breakout and a back test of this liquidity zone over here. Man, this is an insane chart. It's still within the monthly Bollinger Band. I always get like a little bit scared with something that has gone parabolic like this because it could always retrace back to the mean before going up higher. And if it ends up retracing back to the mean, that's like a $10 drop, you know. So I don't like buying big giant candles like that. Just like I don't like buying big giant candles like that, or big giant candles like that. Even though this may be a little bit of a trend changing candle here, I just don't like it. But yeah, like this is a pretty impressive move over here with big volume here too. But yeah, I'm gonna skip this one because the big move probably already happened. I'm not gonna, you know, I'm not gonna bank on that. I still like Alibaba. I think Alibaba has just been tracking the Hang Seng Index. You know, I think the issue with Hang Seng Index is, and this is like the biggest stock there. I think the issue with the Hang Seng is this, is that it's trying to break free. The Hang Seng is trying to break free over here of this big trend line that's been going for a long time. It's not just this trend line here too, it's also a very important log fit level here, if I can ever pull it out here, and you know how much I like to pull it out here. It basically got rejected perfectly at the 0.76 here last month, and that's a big level. I don't anticipate for it to just you know, break out and just go higher from there. I anticipate Alibaba to struggle here. With that said, if you like lines, I have another line here that was pretty intriguing here, which goes all the way and touches all these different points over here, right? I have another line here that is very intriguing. The fact that you have three very nice wicks down here with the Hang Seng touching this bottom of this wedge over here tells me something. It broke down underneath the wedge, broke back inside the wedge here, got rejected at the top of the wedge here, stuck in a range. A big move's going to happen soon, but it might end up getting stuck here for a little bit longer. So that's what's stopping Alibaba, because Alibaba looks just like this. And it's kind of like a signature in terms of trying to tell you what liquidity is doing. I think that is consolidating at where it is right now and is healthy. And I've actually started kind of dollar cost averaging in where price is at right now a little bit, because I think this is still a favorable setup. Because this is a bull flag here on low volume. This is a bull flag here on low volume. We did just complete a little bit of bull flag here with low volume. I think we're just having a little bit of a hard time breaking resistance here because the Hang Seng is not behaving well yet. But if you're looking at the Ichimoku, you basically back tested the Tenkan here perfectly fine. So I think it's gonna hold relatively well. There's a cloud resistance up here around the 180s. And until then, it's stuck in range on declining volume over here. I think it's you're able to handle, you know, like the lower power ranges maybe like the 140s, the higher power ranges maybe like 180s. And in between the lower power range is better risk reward ratio. That's kind of how I see it. If you do fibs from like the highs here to the lows over here, I'm going to add all these different like log fit levels back to kind of take a better look at it. If you look at the fibs here, it got rejected here perfectly at 0.707. And right now we're having a little bit of a hard time breaking back about the 0.618, right? And you can see how 0.5 over here is pretty significant. You see how 0.382 here is pretty significant. 0.707, that's okay. But I think that's what it's doing. If you do, instead of doing like log fib, you do linear fibs. We got rejected here 0.5, and we're still trying to hold a 0.382. It doesn't look like 0.382 is that big of a level based on previous history. So maybe log fibs here work a little bit better because every stock has its own personality. I think we're just trying to break the 0.618 here, but you're just not able to do that because the Hang Seng is still not ready yet. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Look at the other. With that said, I do think that this is a high low type situation. I do think this is consolidation on decline volume, and I just gave you a range. So do what you will with that information. IREN. If you're looking at IREN, it's just kind of like stuck. I did think that 0.5 would be an important level here. I do think that it'd be nice to close the month at 41. Because if it doesn't, it could revisit the 30s again. I think it's at a range. I don't think it necessarily had to go down to the 28, where the initial price level was right there. And I think this initial rejection here was completely understandable and expected, because you don't just hit the 1.272 and just keep going. You hit the 1.272, usually take a break after that. Where is it taking a break? Well, it could go to 28 like a lot of people are speculating, but it just seems to be falling short of it. Is there any important support between that and that? Well, yeah, you have some of the Ichimoku Tenkan Kitchen here around 40, around 42. And if you do a linear fib over here, I mean, it could go all the way down to 1.272, which is where I found support here previously. So you still had a support zone there around the mid-30s. And I still think that it's just consolidating this big giant move that it just had, and I still think this is a bull flag. Although a lot of people are looking at the morphology and think this is like an M shape, and I think this is like it's a lower high, but this is a higher low, so it's wedging. It's not really, it's consolidating, it's wedging. I'm not really that scared about where things are, and I think there's also a big difference between here versus a stock like HIMS too, because with HIMS you really have a loss of momentum here that happened for like the entire year. And with HIMS you have the initial impulse that corrects for about a few months. If you look at the morphology of these kind of corrections, it's actually very similar to over here before the next leg up. I'm not really seeing that exhaustive top formation here based on looking at IREN. And I also don't really think that the sentiment is really that great for IREN, even though it made a big move just like that. So it probably has higher to go. Usually stocks don't necessarily end at the 1.272 on the log fib. It probably would break it, probably go higher, but it probably just needs to consolidate. That's my biggest guess here. I have no idea what KRYS here is. It is looking on the surface. A lot of biotech stocks have been looking great because if you just I'll look at XBI here in a little bit. It's been going up straight for how many months? Like 6 months in a row. Is this something you should get into? Well, it's a little bit overextended away from the tank in here. I get a little bit scared. So usually either price goes sideways and wait for that to catch up, or price go back down to touch the blue line. Even if this is a bullish stock, which it is, it's also been going up on slightly declining volume here. So I don't like to chase where things are with the other, but on the other hand, I also cannot argue with this Bollinger expansion that it could just keep going up higher from there. So the way I see it is I don't think that's a good area to buy now. But I also cannot argue with the fact that it's breaking levels. It probably will hit 313 here, 0.91, and I think that's going to be a pretty important level to watch here, because I don't think I'm the only person or the only cat. I'm sorry, I just gave away that I'm a person. The only Mel that looking at this and think that this is going to be a profit-taking zone. No. Other people are probably going to look at that as well. So just keep that in mind here. Another one to look at is the DGXX. DGXX is looking like it is bottoming. I haven't charted this for a long time. I think the last time I looked at DGXX was back in like November. I left this fib here, and I had an arrow here pointing to 0.618. If what I think I said was what I probably said when I was looking at this stock, because I think I charted this for Danny's Patreon, I thought that it's a bullish stock because it's been forming higher highs and higher lows, but I'm sure as heck not going to buy it when it's right at 0.618. That's probably what I said, and that's probably why I have the arrow right there at resistance. 4 months later, retraced close to 0.382. Is this a buyable area there at a good fib level, where it seemed like there was some previous resistance here, and there's a lot of decent price history here? Yes, right. If I pull out other indicators, why did it not push through? Well, it's just got this big giant red Ichimoku cloud here as resistance. It just couldn't push through in there, right? So if it couldn't push through in there, you're gonna end up getting rejected here until you find a better base and consolidate a little bit more, which I think we're getting close to around $2 to really push through. At this point, you don't really have to do too much. You just have to go sideways, and it'll probably push inside the cloud. The entire retracement down here had retraced the entire move of this green candle over here, but it's on declining volume. So I think we're starting to kind of running out of sellers here a little bit. And I'm not saying that it won't keep going down lower. It could, right? I'm just saying that we're at a good level. We're going to go sideways here. We'll enter the cloud. Up here, it was probably a bad spot to buy. Down here, the reward ratio is probably a lot better, right? It's also basically pushing way outside the monthly Bollinger Band, is basically getting close to the 20-month moving average over here. So this is probably a better area for an entry rather than getting euphoric and getting stuck when you bought here around 6.5. And price right now is $2. And this is a much better entry. That's kind of how I see it. I already talked about SPX earlier. I'm probably not going to talk too much about it. Why don't I do FUTU? Because I like FUTU. I don't have FUTU, but I like FUTU's chart here. And I think that it's going to break into all-time highs here relatively soon. I think once this breaks, it's going to be pretty risk-on for the overall Chinese market. FUTU, for those people who don't know, and now that I mentioned it, nobody's going to be interested because Robinhood hasn't really been doing very well. But I think this is like Robinhood of China. A lot of people use the FUTU app, and it's a pretty popular app. You can trade US stocks here too. So this is what I see. If you do a little bit of retracement here, if you do a linear fib here, it's basically retracing back to around 0.707 of this big move up here. I'm thinking that this big giant thing over here is a cup, and we're just trying to form a handle here. Now the handle, I do have to warn you this, sometimes the handle ends at 0.786, that's a shallow handle. You just go up from there. I was thinking it might because all of these wicks down here, but nope, maybe another leg lower. Sometimes the handle ends at 0.618. Sometimes the handle ends at 0.5. Sometimes the handle ends at 0.382. I do not know how low this higher low is going to get. All I know is that this is a big giant cup here, and this is a handle. And because the Hang Seng Index seemed like it's stuck in a range, but it's getting ready to break out probably over the next couple of months, I see FUTU probably just trying to find some solid footing here, and going to try to break above this previous all-time high wick over here, which has been rejected here for about a couple of months over here. But this downtrend here has been happening with like no volume. So what's going to happen is this, and I don't know for sure, I'm just speculating, but based on what I've seen with something like this in the past, what's probably going to happen is this. FUTU is probably going to either keep going down a little bit further on low volume, and the lower volume, the lower it goes on low volume, the better risk reward ratio it is, or volume can pick up and you can go down further, or this is it because you're running out of sellers. Either way, I think over the next month or two, I don't care how low it gets, all it takes is just a little bit of volume to come in, and it can reverse the downtrend here in just a couple of candles. It'll break all-time high and it'll go up higher. When that happens, I don't know. But I think that scenario is pretty favorable based on what I'm looking here at the chart, based on the formation, and also based on the volume. That's all I have to say about FUTU. Yeah, no, I thank you for joining, and I appreciate y'all joining in such short notice. Looks like the market is just chopping on the first week of the month. Not first week of the month, first day of the week. And it's just chopping here. I'm going to go through a couple other stocks here to kind of share my thoughts here too. Some of these stocks I own, I just got to say, I don't like this, but it is what it is. SOFI broke inside the arc here, and now it's stuck in again arc jail. It is what it is, right? I mean, it starts the week like that. It broke down into the arc here last week. So be it. Am I sad about it? Well, nah, not really. Because I still find that to be holding the Ichimoku, kitchen support over here around 19.37. And if it goes a little bit lower, I think that's fine too. It goes down to 18 bucks, and so be it. A lot of people are eyeing 18 bucks. It could get there, it may not. I don't really care. It's a low high. I think it just needs to find a reaction here. So yeah, just like Palantir, I think it needs to show some kind of reaction here at this level, or maybe slightly lower. That's all I got. Robinhood bounced right off of the 20. It's like a beautiful bounce off the 20. One that's not close yet, we might end up reclaiming the kitchen up here around 82 when it's all said and done. But yeah, I mean, I think it's basically a very overextended stock, and it's just retracing back down to where it should retrace to. And the way I see it, if you're also looking at the GAN here, which again, it's a little bit unfortunate, but it did kind of try to break down underneath the horizontal here. It looks like it's still holding that, but back that's the bottom of the arc here. So yeah, I think we might be consolidating around here for a little bit longer before going up. That's kind of how I see it. A couple other stocks I generally follow, and I'm probably going to end the show after talking about all of these here. The first one is WULF. I think it's just been having a hard time breaking the 0.786 over here for multiple weeks here. It looks like it wants to, but not yet. If it doesn't break that yet, then it comes back down, and try to find a little bit of a higher low here. Maybe this is an ascending triangle. If it goes all the way down to 13.12 or something like that, probably a good area to buy, but I don't know. I don't give financial advice anyway, so I don't really care. CLSK, going back to the 0.618 here, very annoying. $9, a pretty important zone. Needs to hold. If it holds, great. If not, then so be it. Mara held the 0.382 over here last week, but this week we started up below that. 7.76 is a pretty important level. If we end up holding that area, great. Sometimes you just have a little bit of false breakdown here, but I like to see it holding the 0.382 here and consolidate a little bit before having a good trend reversal. But it is what it is. Sometimes you just have to kind of be patient, just see how these things work out. I think that is a little bit too far overextended to the downside. I think this is a very big corrective wave for this impulsive wave that happened, which means that whenever this wave down here is done, and if this is truly a higher low here compared to that, then, anyway, assuming that institutions are accumulating this, assuming that there's something brewing behind the scene, I don't know. Bitfarm, I think, is just retracing back here to this fib channel area here. I think it's just retracing to the 20-month moving average right there. And it's just had a big move, and it's just retracing back like that. There's nothing special about the move here. Galaxy Digital is just basically decided to backtest the 20-month moving average after being way outside the upper Bollinger Band. So be it. It wasn't ready to do the full expansion and go Palantiring, but it decided to retrace back over here. Initially had Bollinger Band expansion, decided to contract. So be it. But during the whole process here, it had a healthy backtest of the monthly Ichimoku cloud. So there's nothing bad that I have to really say about it. Cypher is still holding Ichimoku tank in the kitchen up here above. It's still holding a previous all-time high here. at least around the zone here as support. 15.39 was that number there at that wick. It's around the area. The month is not closed yet, so we'll see whether or not that level holds. BTBT, another stock that I'm looking at here, I would really like to see it holding 0.5 at $1.74. If it does end up holding that area there, I think that's a pretty decent area to really truly bounce off of and do some great things here moving forward. But it's been doing nothing for about 3 years now. Yeah, I just said that it's been doing nothing for, I take that back, doing nothing for about 2.5 years. So be it. I don't have anything else to say about it. Finally, I'm going to end the show here with Coinbase. I think that's a good stock here to end. And then we will end the live stream here and move with our business moving forward. We basically back tested the monthly Ichimoku cloud. It was an extremely brutal back test, but it did it. And if you do a log fib here, it also back tests a 0.618 here once again. It's a very important level to hold. Back tested both of these. Usually these kinds of things here you can see is more or less like a right angle ascending wedge is what I would call it, or right angle ascending triangle would be what I call it. Technically speaking, sometimes these things are bearish, but there's actually been a study, I think by a guy, I can't remember his name, like Babalski, I think that's his name. When he looked and backtracked all these like right angled ascending wedge over here, there's like a 55% chance for bullish continuation. So these things actually may lean a little bit more bullish here. It had a great reaction at these levels. And if you look at the weekly actually looked like a beautiful bottom here. Two very nice tweezer bottoms. So I think that we are probably getting ready for at least a strong retracement back to the mean, because it's just been down a lot. You can even see on the daily here form a decent double bottom over here. So yeah, I look forward to Coinbase probably showing some relative strength here, because it's just been so destroyed and it wants to at least retrace back to the mean here a little bit. That's kind of what I'm seeing here with Coinbase. Now, is Coinbase going to pull something crazy here like I saw with another stock here, which back in April of 2025 I was extremely brutalized by? Would it end up doing the same thing as Cypher? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I mean, this whole thing here that has basically plummeted on very little volume here just reminds me of that. But there's no guarantee that this is going to happen, right? But if you're looking at, this is extremely scary back then, because if you look at the Bollinger Band, it was basically getting close to the low Bollinger Band. I thought it was going to touch it. It didn't, right? Same thing here for Coinbase. I thought it was going to, hey, it touched the low Bollinger Band, maybe, I don't know, right? But I also see this as a potential for this fractal to play out here too, which is also part of the reason why I haven't really given up on Coinbase. Imagine how destroyed I was over here. I end up trying to buy more Cypher around like $3 or so. I thought that, hey, maybe around the $3 range over here could hold. Nope, this all the way down here to $1.86. I was extremely devastated at that time. So sad, crying. I was finding Tracker's shoulder, and I was just crying on his shoulder. I was like, Tracker, I'm so sad, Tracker. Actually, yeah, and then next thing you know, it just decided to do its thing. So, nothing is ever as it seems, and nothing is ever what you think it is. And when most people are thinking one way, it usually goes the other. when most people are thinking one way, it usually goes the other. What was that quote that Elon Musk has? The most likely result is the most entertaining, or something like that. Anyway, I've been rambling for way too long. It's been close to an hour. Thank you so much for joining this surprise live stream. I'm gonna get offline now, and I don't know what to do for the rest of the afternoon. I'm probably gonna look at charts because that's what I do on my free time, and it's somewhat rejuvenating to me because I'm sick in the head. And I also want to say this again: 恭喜發財，恭喜發財，大家。恭喜發財. I hope you guys have a wonderful Lunar New Year. Despite of today being a red day again, after a gigantic green day on Friday, so I guess it's karma. Tracker, love you. Thanks for coming on. I hope you guys